Tell me the kid on the cover doesn't look like a young Finn Wolfhard. I know it's a little girl, but like, can you... Somebody in the comments please validate me. Hi besties, welcome. Today, I hope your day feels like a really cold shower after a long hot day at the beach. Today I'm wearing my South Carolina sweatshirt, and that is because today we're talking about my beautiful home state of South Carolina. Now, South Carolina and I have a complicated relationship, to say the least. Growing up, I really hated South Carolina and I wanted desperately to get away from it and get out.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
A lot of that has to do with, you know, the really dark history of politics in South Carolina. But I think because of that, a lot of times the South gets looked over as the really interesting, beautiful, diverse place that it is. I have learned to really appreciate my home state since I've been in quarantine. I've had to be here for so long and I've had to be here as an adult. So I was really interested to do a video where I read books that were set in the South and then talked about whether I think it's an accurate representation and, you know, whether they captured the feeling of being in the low country or at a South Carolina beach. So the first book on my list is actually going to be a reread, and that is The Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd. I love this book. I think I read it my freshman year of high school for school, and I'm actually wondering if other states have this in their curriculum or if it's in ours because it's set in South Carolina. This book follows Lily, a young girl who has lost her mother and now has a sort of stand-in mother in this black woman named Rosaline. At one point, Rosaline insults 3 of the racists in the town that they're living in, and so Lily and Rosaline decide to flee that town and go to a different county in South Carolina, and they meet these 3 black women who are beekeepers and they end up living with them. It's kind of their story of found family, and it's also such a cool story about what being a woman in the South means, so it's something that I really connect to for those reasons. The next one is a bit of a lighter read. I'm hoping kind of literally a beach read, and that is Return to Sullivan's Island by Dorothea Benton Frank. Dorothea Benton Frank is super popular in South Carolina. The target audience is like middle-aged women, I would say, but she writes about women in the low country. I'll try to put like a map of what the low country means because I say that and some people don't know what I'm talking about, but like the beaches and marshlands kind of South Carolina in the more southern coastal regions. So this book follows Beth, who has recently graduated from college. She wants to go and travel the world, but she gets chosen by her family to house sit their house on Sullivan's Island, and so she has to kind of spend the summer there, and all of these memories of her childhood come back. I think it's about her kind of reconnecting to those family ties. I just thought this would be one that I could really relate to. I'm excited to read this one. I think it's gonna be really fun. Next, I picked up Bastard Out of Carolina by Dorothy Allison from my local library this morning. Every time I look at this cover, I'm like, that is Finn Wolfhard from season 1 of Stranger Things. This is a book about a fucked up family in rural South Carolina in Greenville County. What family looks like when you're poor and when you have a bastard kid and when things go crazy. I have heard this compared to To Kill a Mockingbird. I've heard it compared to Faulkner. I've heard it compared to a lot of very famous Southern literature. I just have this weird feeling that I'm gonna really love this book. And then we have the most famous South Carolinian novelist, Pat Conroy. I think I'm gonna dive in and do The Prince of Tides. It is a brick of a book. It's set over 40 years. It is the story of Tom Wingo and his twin sister. They are struggling to triumph over the dark and tragic legacy of the extraordinary family into which they were born. Everybody says that Pat Conroy's writing is so beautiful, that it captures the low country so beautifully. And then the last book I have on my list is a bit of a cheat, because it's not set in South Carolina. It's set in North Carolina. But I've been dying to read it, and I'm gonna. And that is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This book has been like massive recently. New York Times bestseller. It was in Reese's book club, and now they're turning it into a movie, I think, with Daisy Edgar Jones, who played Marianne in Normal People. It's set in the marshlands of North Carolina's Outer Banks. Yes, like the Netflix show Outer Banks. Although, fun fact, most of Outer Banks on Netflix was filmed in Charleston. So if you were like, damn, it looks so pretty there. Yeah, that was South Carolina. That lighthouse that they climb, I climbed all the time as a kid when I went to the beach. Anyway, it's about Kaya, or as all the locals call her, Marsh Girl. And basically a body washes up dead in the marsh, and Kaya, who is this kind of wild, almost like feral woman girl, lives in the marsh. They all suspect her and think that she's the murderer. These are the books that I am reading. So now we read. I decided I'm gonna start with Prince of Tides. I'm just gonna start with the big one. This book is 687 pages, so it's not little. I have read the prologue and chapter 1, and I'm already obsessed. Also, I would like to say that I think it has one of the best first lines that I've ever read. My wound is geography. It is also my anchorage, my port of call. I just am already loving it so much. I don't even want to keep talking because I just want to go keep reading. Book is beating my ass. It's like somebody punched me in the face and then ripped out my heart and then stomped on it and then spit on it. All that to say, I'm loving it. Okay, it's been like a week, I think, since I checked in. I'm about to finish Prince of Tides. I have, I think, like 80 pages left, and I'm afraid it's gonna be 80 pages of pure pain. I'm going in anyway. Finished Prince of Tides a few days ago. I was an emotional wreck. Hello, bud. But now I'm reading The Secret Life of Bees. I remember why I loved it. It's so good. I don't know if I'll be able to finish it, but hoping to get close before I go into work. I feel like Prince of Tides and Secret Life of Bees both so far have this really strong sense of place that I feel like you have when you grow up in the South. There's a lot about the South that's like intoxicating and amazing, and there's a lot about the South that's really dark, and both of these books so far have kind of touched on that weird dichotomy. Okay, I just finished The Secret Life of Bees. I loved it. Even though it has a lot of like difficult subject matter, it makes me very happy. Next, I'm gonna read Where the Crawdads Sing. If you don't know what crawdads are, my mom calls them river cockroaches. They're not crabs and they're not shrimp, but they're like almost in between. I'll put a picture of a crawdad. Called crawdads, crawdaddies, crayfish, crawfish. And we have a festival every year in my hometown called the Crawfish Festival. For now, I am going to my friend's house for dinner. I'm taking him Crap Taxidermy, which is a book with horrifying taxidermy. So far, I hate it. The main character is super spoiled and privileged. This book feels like it's beating me over the head with I'm set in the low country. All of the cliches about living in the South and living in Charleston being shoved into my ear holes, and I don't like it. I've literally only listened to it for like half an hour, but I don't know if I want to keep going. crawdads sing. It's really good. 120 pages in, so I have this much left. And I love the descriptions of the marshland, but also just Kaya's journey of like trying to form relationships or forming relationships with the few people that she kind of allows to be in her sphere. I'm gonna keep reading it. I just wanted to update you. I just finished the first chapter of Bastard Out of Carolina. I have mixed feelings so far. I mean, I'm only like 15 pages in. It's definitely a little bit slow. Hi, Yorick. I'm gonna keep reading. Every time I look at this cover, I just see Finn Wolfhard. Okay, I'm like 40 pages in. I feel like I'm gonna throw up because of a really horrible scene. So as of right now, I think I'm gonna stop reading. And my friend who has read it said that it gets a lot more graphic and a lot worse. It is causing me a supreme amount of anxiety. Okay, I filmed the intro to this video like a month ago, and I feel like I did not eloquently explain anything. I love South Carolina. And I love the South. I grew up hating it and I grew up wanting to get out so badly. I feel like a lot of that is pretty normal of young people, just, you know, wanting to leave their hometowns and experience something new. But I had a lot of anger towards my home state because of a lot of the backward politics that go on here. Seeing policies constantly enacted that hurt women, that hurt Black South Carolinians, that hurt gay people in South Carolina. It was just difficult to grow up and watch that continue to happen. But what I didn't think about was the fact that when everybody who disagrees with those policies leave, there's nobody left to speak up for the people they affect. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, and I think a lot of people just dismiss the South as everyone in the South being racist and homophobic and sexist, and that's simply not true. Those are just the voices that have been amplified. Let's talk about these books. The first book I read for this video was The Prince of Tides by Pat Conroy. This book destroyed me. This book is a family saga. It follows our narrator Tom Wingo throughout his childhood, growing up in the low country of South Carolina, and then into his adulthood as he goes to New York to try to help his sister who is really struggling with her mental health. He is enlisted to talk to her therapist to try to shed some light on all of the events that could have led to her breakdown. And so through him talking to his therapist, we, the reader, get layers pulled back from their childhood and get to see kind of the progression of remembering some of these traumatic events that have caused his sister to break down. It's kind of multi-generational, but it mainly focuses on the three Wingo children: Tom, our narrator, his twin Savannah, and Luke, their older brother. This book captured so much for me of what it feels like to grow up in the South, but it also painted these amazing pictures of the southern marshland, which is my favorite place on earth, and the beaches of South Carolina. And the writing, unreal. It was so poetic. I also think the kind of strained southern familial relationships that revolve around religion and masculinity and repression of trauma, some of those very specific things that occur in the Wingo family, I think are very common in Southern families, and the strain that it puts on the relationships in this book I think was very well done. I will try to put a link in the description to where you can find the trigger warnings. If you're interested in reading this, definitely read those first. There are some very graphic, very difficult scenes in this book. Pat Conroy also lived a very difficult and challenging life in terms of his familial relationships, and he put a lot of that into his work. Because of that, it feels very real and it feels very raw. On the back, the blurb says that this is a brash thunderstorm of a novel, and I feel like that just puts it so perfectly because this book felt like a storm. These characters are definitely flawed. They say and do some really horrible things, but I think it's a very interesting portrait of how people are raised in the South and trying to overcome some of the things that they learn as children. After Prince of Tides was a reread for me, I read The Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd. It's just such a fantastic book. Again, there are some trigger warnings for this book. I will link them down below. Honey being a central focal point of this book makes so much sense because this book kind of washes over you like honey. It's so sweet and warm. This book is interesting to me because it kind of flips the white savior narrative on its head. In this book, even though our main character is a young white girl, she is saved by these 3 Black women who show her kindness and decide to take her in. And I think it's just a really interesting story about Lily kind of unlearning some of the trauma and violence that she grew up with because of the kindness of these strangers. Then I got about 30 minutes into the audiobook of Return to Sullivan's Island by Dorothea Benton Frank, and I DNF'd it. This felt like a caricature of Southern people. It just felt like she was beating me over the head with, these women are Southern. There was one line that I really hated. Despite the economy, there was gentrification everywhere, but the kind that pleased her. Most of the old migrant worker cottages that flanked the road onto the island had been resurrected and transformed into million-dollar futures. It was amazing, she thought, what you could accomplish with the combination of elbow grease, a little money, and a clear vision. Didn't love that. This to me felt like all the things I don't like about the South, about very, very privileged people completely wrapped up in their own problems to the point where they can't extend their consciousness beyond themselves. Maybe she goes on an incredible arc and realizes all that. I don't know because I didn't finish it. I just really kind of instantly didn't like the writing style. I didn't like the dialogue. I stopped. Sorry. Glad that was the one I didn't like. Next, I read Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, and I loved it. I think this book was so brilliantly written, and it's a sprinkle of murder mystery, a sprinkle of Southern marshland, and a sprinkle of young woman coming of age on her own in nature. It's beautiful. It's really wonderfully written. The ending shocked me. Like, there was a great twist. And overall, it's just such a celebration of the marshland and of this like beautiful vanishing place that people are trying to save. And lastly, I picked up Bastard Out of Carolina by Dorothy Allison. As I'm sure you saw in the vlog, I did not finish this book. Not because it was not good. There were some very triggering things in here. Some very graphic child abuse and other things that I just am not in the headspace to read right now. I thought about pushing through and trying to force myself to read it for this video, but then I was like, no, if 50 pages in my anxiety is already skyrocketing, I'm not gonna force myself to read it. I'm gonna take care of myself and put it down for now. I encourage you to stop reading books if they are causing you anxiety or if they are triggering you. You don't have to finish the book. Overall, I think some of the main themes of all of these books that were set in South Carolina is that they're really dark, which makes sense to me. They're very complex and layered, and I think that is true of growing up here. It's a complex and interesting relationship you begin to have with the place that you grew up because there's a fierce love and protective kind of aspect of growing up here. There's also a lot of really dark history, and I think a lot of these books did a really good job of addressing those dark elements and how they show up in everyday life. All 3 of the books that I finished were really fantastic. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Go ahead and comment down below and tell me where you're from and if you've read any books from where you're from, what they are. Did you like them? Were they accurate depictions of where you're from? Hit the big red button that says subscribe and turn on bell notifications so you don't miss any videos that I post, because I'm not on a posting schedule, so who knows when they'll be. And in case you haven't heard it today, I love you. Bye.